My project was spreadsheets, and as like a short introductory description of it, it will be an online interactive spreadsheet to help people who are either in poverty or in food insecurity be able to afford and find healthy foods. And by spreadsheet, if you think of an Excel spreadsheet, it would be like that, but put on a website and be able to interact with it, obviously. And so food security was the main target group of people, food insecure people that I was looking at and researching how I could really affect them with this. And food insecurity is when not everyone at all times has the ability to afford and eat safe, sufficient, nutritious food. Food deserts, I don't need to change that. Food deserts they kind of correspond to food security as 3 pillars, and they're food access, food availability, and food use. And food deserts correspond to food access, which is your ability to go and obtain food from a grocery store or a convenience store or something. And what they are is areas in the US, typically, is where it's researched, in which people can't find a grocery store that has a lot of produce, so they have to resort to alternatives like convenience stores. And I was looking at how past attempts to have some impact on these and make the people there food secure had worked, and pretty much none of them had worked at all. What research had found was that there's pretty much no connection between where you live relative to a grocery store. Like if you live close to a grocery store as opposed to far, it doesn't affect your dietary habits. And even when in experiments they introduced grocery stores to places that were food deserts and where people were food insecure, they were eating much less healthy. They had worse dietary habits. They found that introducing grocery stores to those places still didn't affect their dietary habits, even if more people did start to go to those grocery stores. So obviously, trying to affect food access wasn't something that would work. So nutritional knowledge, which corresponds to food use, which is another one of the pillars of food security, is one of the next things that you could look at targeting. And while with food deserts, all of the research had been really mixed as to whether or not anything worked. With nutritional knowledge, the research that has been done seems to show that there is definitely a correlation between how much knowledge you have about nutrition and your dietary habits. So while the other stuff was inconclusive and you can't really base any attempt to affect food security off of it, this you could. And other research which was it was in the UK, and it was on how the public perceives nutrition and how general practitioners do, showed that they really don't have the same idea about dietary changes. The public thinks that the reason that they don't change the diet to a healthier one is because they don't have the knowledge to, while general practitioners think that it's because the public is apathetic and doesn't want to change. And the other thing that was found in this same study is that neither the public nor general practitioners have the amount of nutritional knowledge that they should be expected to. And so with my project, which rather than affecting food deserts, I guess you could think of it more, not affecting food deserts, rather than affecting food access, this would be affecting food use or nutritional knowledge. So things that I think were really the main important points are that it's objectively informative. You can't be giving people opinions or things that are really controversial and stating that they're fact. An example of that would be something like, is coffee good or bad? Is dietary intake of cholesterol good or bad? Simple or complex, because a lot of people will want to know really quickly just off the bat what's healthy or what's not. Other people are going to want to know why things are healthy. So to try to appeal to all the audience that's curious about nutritional knowledge, you would want both. Interactive or static is more of just people who are trying to use this because it's going to be a website. A lot of people don't have computers that'll function with interactive websites, so you have to have the information displayed somewhere as well. Reliable, because you can't be giving people completely incorrect information. And free, because if you're targeting people who are in food deserts, who are food insecure, they're not going to be able to pay for things like this. So the usefulness of this, I tried to measure by interviewing people who were experts in either food security or nutrition, or web development was the third one, but that isn't necessarily on here as much. And so there's a website called examine.com, and it's a really good reference for nutrition and supplements. Everything is cited. And so I talked to the lead researcher there, and he said that the main reasons for his success were that they filled in a niche completely. There was no other website, no other resource at all that had been as much of a compendium as they could with all the information that they had, and that there was no main source. It was a small group of people that was interested, and there was no one else that was doing it, which I think in my situation is similar. There's no one who's made anything that can adequately help people determine what the cheapest, healthiest food would be at the closest location. And so in terms of actually developing something, this is what it looked like at first. It's horrible. It slowly progressed to looking decent. It doesn't have a spreadsheet on it. The most recent picture that I can give is this. And it looks similar to this now, and you can kind of see where a spreadsheet would go in the middle. But it's clearly not finished. And to prove that it's not just dragging and dropping things in Paint, this is what I'm actually doing to make it. And that's, I guess, the next part of this is that everything, half of it, I guess, was the research about food security and all the pillars of it, and food deserts and nutritional knowledge, and the other half was everything about programming and web development. And so this is what I'd like all that programming to lead to, is something that, as you can see, it has columns that are each like a different variable about the food, preferably with the things that are most important, like price, how healthy they are, and the distance first. And then you would be able to add in extra variables later. But this is, if this didn't really look like anything to you, that's what I'm hoping for it to be. And so in terms of the programming stuff, I'll explain briefly what these are. So what I'd been doing for all of the coding, all the non-research stuff, was HTML and CSS, and HTML is really writing out the way that things should be structured on a website, and CSS is like the skin or the design of it. JavaScript, everything from there down is things that I will attempt to learn and implement into it so that it's interactive more than it is now. And so JavaScript is small interactive things. PHP would be processing forms that people put in. If people want to search for something, you need to have that to process the search. MySQL is for the database of it, which it needs to be able to pull in huge amounts of information from, I know there's a government database for the nutritional content of foods, things like that. Ruby is for more mathematical calculations, and Ajax and jQuery would be for having the website be able to update without refreshing it, which would be much more of a convenience than anything. And so that's what I'd hope to do eventually. Obviously, it's not there yet. It's much more preliminary than that. And at the very bottom, you see the strange icon. A small orange is what I believe I'll be going with for hosting it, but that's not certain. One other small thing to mention is when I said that you have to have important variables first, price per unit would be one of them. So you can determine what the price is, either per serving or per 100 grams, which is more absolute, and you can go among different foods. The healthiness of it isn't something that's really easy to measure because it's tough to objectively say that something's healthy. So for that, there are companies that have made nutritional rating systems, and one of them that I like a lot is NuVal. And what they've done is they've made like a sort of equation that takes the different specific nutrients and things that are worse for you in foods, calculates out a number from 1 to 100, and gives one of those to every food, whether it's processed or not. So that's how you would quantify the healthiness for that. I feel like that's important to mention. And that is all.